The heat of Babylon presses like a hand on Elias's neck as he scrapes ink from a cracked reed, chasing a single silver coin across the stone floor of the scriptorium. His fingers are stained black, his parchment thin as hunger, yet the merchant's gold coins keep clinking in the next room, warm under torchlight, as if wealth itself is laughing at him. Elias reaches out, bold for the first time in months, then flinches as a scribe's elbow knocks his tablets from the table. Dust blooms. Notes smear. His sure thing becomes a ruined page. That mistake cost you more than the parchment, a calm voice says. Malachi steps into the golden light like a shadow cut from wisdom, robes softly catching the fire glow, eyes fixed on Elias's ruined lines. Elias swallows. First write. First count. First obey the rules, so why am first still poor? Malachi crouches and taps the ink smear with one finger. Because you copy laws. You don't understand them. Elias's breath turns quick. Then teach me. The ancient laws, how the wealthy keep their gold. Malachi lifts a small clay tablet etched with careful marks. First lesson. Stop trying to chase money. Start building it. Elias blinks. How? Malachi's answer lands like a measured hammer. Write down every coin that enters your hand. Then write down every coin that leaves it. If you can't see the flow, you can't control it. The scriptorium seems to hum, oil lamp warmth, bronze bells in the distance, gold coins whispering behind shut doors, while Elias's stomach tightens with hope and fear. He rushes to his tablet, tries to remember the day's spending, and realizes how many small losses he's never counted. His earlier pride crumbles into truth. Malachi's voice stays steady, almost gentle. When you fail to track your money, you drift. Tracking is your anchor. Elias looks up, ink-streaked and determined. So, if first write it all, every coin, then first can finally win. For now, Malachi says, your rule is simple. Track every coin before you spend a single shekel. The warm golden light holds on Elias's hands as they steady over parchment, because the oldest law isn't about gold at all. It's about attention. And even today, when the numbers are counted, the mistakes can't hide. The struggle of Elias. Introduce Elias, a hard-working scribe in Babylon who earns gold but remains poor, and his deep desire to find the secret of wealth. Heat pressed down on ancient Babylon as street vendors fanned themselves with woven mats, and sunlit dust drifted through oil lamp glow. In that warm, golden light, Elias hunched over a low bench, his ink-stained fingers smudged black along parchment edges, while a thin layer of dust clung to the gold coins he handled for customers. The coins clinked, bright, quick sounds that promised comfort, yet when Elias counted what he'd earned, the metal never turned into safety. A roof repair demanded more than his wages could spare, and a single sickness in the household could swallow a month of careful work. His trade was writing, contracts, receipts, and tidy lists of grain and wages, copied line by line until his eyes burned and his wrists cramped. He could write a name without trembling and measure measures without guessing, but wealth still slipped away like water through reeds. One merchant paid him in tarnished coin, another insisted on later, and a third bargained over every tablet, then praised his handwriting as if praise were payment. Elias kept accepting scribal errands because ink and parchment were honest, and gold was rare, and hunger was immediate. Still, the secret of wealth refused to show itself in any ledger he copied, only in the gaps, small omissions, hidden terms, and unspoken rules of bargaining. That night, the courtyard lanterns burned in steady amber halos, turning smoke into a soft veil. Elias rehearsed his own receipts by lamplight, sorting what he'd written with what he'd actually received, and his breath tasted of dried ink. He had saved carefully, yet his savings didn't grow, it merely relocated, into debts, into fees, into the next unavoidable purchase. A wise mentor's shadow fell across the doorway the next morning, and the air sharpened with opportunity. Malachi, with eyes like polished stone, watched Elias gather his tools as if weighing a scale. Malachi spoke without ceremony, voice calm enough to cut through noise. You think wealth is only gold. Elias swallowed, staring at the tablets stacked beside him. Gold comes to me, he said, then lowered his gaze. And still first remain poor. Malachi tapped the edge of a parchment, a quiet sound like a stamp of authority. Then you've been paid for writing, not for ownership. Write again, but this time capture the law beneath the ink. Elias's hands tightened on his stylus. What law? Malachi answered, short and sharp. The ancient rules that decide who keeps the surplus, when promises are made, when risks are shared, and when repayment is enforced. Elias agreed to learn, not because he wished for miracles, but because he wanted a system he could apply tomorrow. Malachi's first lesson came like a door opening onto a wider world. Before you trade your labor for gold, demand terms that return value to you when outcomes shift. Then he pointed to Elias's usual habit, signing quickly, accepting vague payment schedules, and trusting that fair talk would behave like fairness. A clear contract is not polite, Malachi said. It is protection. Elias exhaled, feeling the weight of his past mistakes in every loose clause he'd copied for others, and in the warm, golden light he finally understood that the secret wasn't in earning more, it was in keeping what was earned. Remember this rule: never give your labor without clear terms that secure repayment and protect your share of the value. The bargain with the mentor. Elias meets the wealthy money lender Malachi and strikes a deal. Elias stays up all night to finish a task in exchange for the laws of gold. The braziers along the street threw warm golden light across Babylon's dust, and Elias's ink-stained fingers shook as he tried to copy the merchant's ledgers in time. His parchment was thin as excuse, and every smudge looked like failure when his patron's coins were counted within earshot. Outside, the air smelled of oil, sweat, and hot clay, while inside the scribe's stall the stylus scratched like a warning. Malachi arrived without hurry, a wealthy money lender draped in clean linen, his rings catching the light whenever he turned his head. Elias straightened, but his chair squealed and betrayed his poverty. Malachi set a small purse on the table. The clink of gold coins sounded calm, almost patient. You write what others forget, Malachi said, voice low and wise. Elias swallowed. First write until my hand cramps, he answered, hoping that honesty would count as payment. Then write longer, Malachi replied, and his gaze pinned Elias to the page. A debt had been called in, an obligation tied to goods, not comfort, and Malachi needed a task finished without delay. Elias could see the risk in the way his own master feared missing even a single entry. One blank line could cost more than a month of wages. You have parchment, Malachi said, and you have skill. What you lack is time. Elias glanced at the deadline etched into everyone's faces. If first stay through the night, he asked carefully, what do you offer in return? Malachi leaned in, warm golden light sliding over his knuckles. The laws of gold, he said, as if it were a set of tablets hidden in plain sight. Not gifts. Instruction, so you never bargain blind again. Elias's throat tightened, his stomach agreed before his pride did. They struck the bargain with a handshake and a stack of work. Malachi's seal pressed into clay at the ledger's edge, marking authority, and Elias began copying, balances, terms, and promises shaped into clean columns. The stylus kept moving even when his wrist burned, and the oil lamp trembled, throwing dancing shadows across the tablets. Do not chase profit with guesses, Malachi told him in brief, sharp phrases. Mark the source. Mark the cost. Mark the delay. Elias corrected a muddled measure, then corrected it again, because Malachi's eyes never left the line where mistakes hide. When Elias's hands started to fail, Malachi didn't soften. He instructed, read the contract as if you're already paying it. Near dawn, the last stroke dried with a faint crackle, and Elias exhaled as though he'd been underwater. Malachi reviewed the finished pages like a hawk inspecting a field, then nodded once, satisfied. Now you learn the law, he said, drawing a circle in the air with one finger. Gold follows the rules of agreement, not the hunger of the day. Elias looked at the coins and then at his own ink-stained hands, realizing the exchange wasn't only for labor, it was for a way to think. Malachi tapped the ledger and the sound was small, but it landed like a verdict. From this night on, your rule is simple, never sign or lend without writing every term, amount, time, and consequence on the same page. And under the last warm glow of the braziers, Elias carried that truth forward, knowing the same laws still govern money today. Agreements made clearly keep their value long after the lamp goes out. The first law, pay yourself first. Malachi explains the power of the 1/10 rule, why a part of everything Elias earns is his to keep before paying anyone else. Oven heat pressed against the street stones of ancient Babylon, and Elias's ink-stained fingers shook each time the coppers hit the counter, clink, then silence, then worry. He was a poor scribe, hired for urgent copies of contracts and temple records, but every day his hands smelled of smoke and old parchment while his purse stayed thin. A warm golden lamplight from a clay oil lamp flickered across rows of tablets, making the gold coins look kinder than they were. When payment finally arrived, he rushed to settle debts and please his patrons as if delay were a sin, and somehow the remainder still vanished before nightfall. Malachi found him hunched over a ledger he could barely afford, copying figures with a stubborn, hungry precision. The wise mentor didn't raise his voice, he just let the coins speak. "You wait until everyone else is fed," Malachi said, tapping Elias's counting bowl with one careful knuckle. "Then you hope there's something left for you." Elias swallowed, eyes on the scattered shekels and the smear of ink where his stylus had slipped. "First pay first," Elias replied, "because they will come for their due, if first don't." Malachi leaned closer to the lamp's glow, and the tablet surface caught it like polished bronze. "There is a law older than excuses," he said. "Pay yourself first." Malachi explained it with the simple, sharp logic of the fraction written in any trader's tongue. Take one part out of every 10 before anyone else claims it. "Not after," he said, "and not when you feel safe." Elias frowned, calculating in his head as if the numbers might bite. 1/10 of everything first earn. Malachi nodded, and his calm made the rule feel heavier than the coins. Your hands must learn ownership before your mind learns begging. Elias watched as Malachi drew a line on a fresh tablet, 10 marks for the whole, then 1 mark separated, kept apart like a sealed jar of grain. "That one part is yours to keep," Malachi continued. "Before rent, before favors, before angry creditors, before the next order you're tempted to overpromise." The mentor's fingers moved with practiced restraint, as if he was teaching a rhythm rather than a trick. They tested the rule immediately, because words alone wouldn't quiet hunger. Elias received a payment in gold coins for a contract copy, bright rounds that warmed in the palm, each one carrying the sound of possibility. He had planned to settle his landlord's demand at once, to buy better reed pens, to appease a patron who liked to be paid promptly. Instead, Malachi said, "Count it twice, first take your one part, then decide what's left for everyone else." Elias's breath caught when he separated the 10th pile, and placed it in a small locked container beneath his work mat. The coins didn't multiply in midair, yet the peace they brought was immediate. The clink sounded different now, less like surrender. When Elias handed the remainder over, he did it without panic, because his future already had a portion secured. "Why does this work?" Elias asked, because fear still lived in his chest, and he needed reason strong enough to carry. Malachi answered like a teacher correcting a miscopied line, quick, exact, and kind. "Because you stop financing your own shortage," he said. "A scribe who delays his own savings trains himself to depend on luck. A scribe who keeps the 10th trains himself to compound options." He pointed at the tablet marks Elias had made, 1/10 set aside consistently, then used with intention, a sturdier stylus, a spare sheet of parchment, the ability to turn down an unfair commission, the patience to negotiate. "When your pay arrives, everyone else will always feel urgent," Malachi said. "But your portion, kept first, becomes the steady rhythm that turns urgent into manageable." Elias's early mistake had been treating his earnings like a river that couldn't be redirected. The law rerouted it at the source. By the lamp's golden light, Elias began to change what his hands reached for. Ink-stained urgency gave way to measured order, and his work became calmer because his finances stopped wobbling at every patron's request. He still faced heat, still battled thin supplies, still had to buy reed and parchment, yet the locked container under his mat taught him control. Malachi's final instruction was as simple as the rule itself: before you pay anyone else, set aside 1/10 of every amount you earn as your own first. Even today, when money comes and demands crowd in, that same fraction still acts like a gate, protecting your future before the present can take everything. The lessons of investment. Elias makes mistakes with his first savings, but Malachi teaches him to seek advice from experts and make his gold work like a slave. The bronze heat of ancient Babylon pressed against Elias's ink-stained sleeves as he bent over a rough parchment ledger, counting his first saved gold coins by the light of a brazier that burned with warm golden lighting. The coins clinked small, stubborn sounds, while his master's long shadow stretched across the floor like a warning. Elias had learned to copy laws carefully, but wealth behaved differently. It slid away when you treated it like mere handwriting. He tried to make it grow the way scribes improved a margin note, by changing the words without understanding the meaning beneath them. Elias handed his savings to a wandering trader because the man spoke smoothly and promised quick profit, then waited as the trader's face vanished into the crowded streets. When payment did not return, Elias did not rage. He searched for the detail he had missed, the fine lines in the agreement that he had never read twice. One portion went to a questionable venture, shared money collected in public, delivered in private, and the rest he stored at home, leaving it idle under folded cloth like a tool that never touched a job. Malachi watched him scrubbing from his fingertips, patient as a scribe who knows the next line can still be corrected. Malachi's voice cut through the dust and bargaining cries, short and sure. Gold grows in motion, Elias, but motion without counsel is a fall. Elias swallowed and pointed at the tablet beside them, where Malachi had copied ancient rules of contracts, clear terms, accountable witnesses, and written commitments that could be produced when memory failed. Whom should first ask? Elias asked, and the question came out like a breath he wished he could retract. Those who work in this trade, Malachi replied. Let experts measure risk before you place your name on ink. If a man sells certainty, ask for evidence. He leaned in until the warm oil lamp glow painted his face in amber. Do not chase talk, chase records. Then Malachi taught him the heart of investment. Make your gold work like a slave by assigning it a task, not by begging it to move. A coin is not a prayer, he said. It is labor under rules. Elias learned to split his savings with discipline, keeping a portion liquid for needs, reserving another portion for a defined opportunity that had documentation, and never pouring everything into one mouth of chance. When he considered lending, Malachi insisted on written terms, repayment schedules, the purpose of the funds, and proof that the borrower could honor the agreement. When he considered trade, Malachi demanded clarity on the goods, the route, and who bore what loss if shipments failed. You want returns, Malachi said, but you also want protection. A strong contract is a fence and knowledge is the gatekeeper. Elias made fresh attempts, slower and wiser. He sought counsel from merchants who actually moved grain and cloth, from accountants who could track weights and measures, and from seasoned scribes who knew which clauses survived disputes. Instead of handing gold over blindly, he demanded receipts, and watched the transactions leave paper traces, ink stamps, witness marks, and the calm weight of enforceable commitments. Mistakes still found him, because life in Babylon never stopped testing hands, but each error became smaller, caught earlier, corrected with counsel before it could swallow his whole future. Malachi's final instruction landed like a clean line in a tablet's margin. Before you invest, ask an expert, and get the terms in writing. Gold cannot work without rules. Even now, the lesson holds steady in any market. Risk without knowledge is gambling, but disciplined investing with clear agreements turns money from idle weight into dependable labor. The richest scribe in Babylon. Elias applies the laws over the years, builds a fortune, and becomes a wise mentor himself, proving anyone can achieve financial freedom. The heat of ancient Babylon presses against Elias's ink-stained fingers as he shuffles beside the marketplace, parchment rolled too tight, sandals too thin, and the thin clink of someone else's gold coins cutting through the warm golden air. He has learned to count by watching, a vendor weighing barley, a scribe bargaining by the shape of his letters, a merchant measuring profit by what leaves his purse and what returns. Tonight, his stomach tightens at the scent of lamp oil and dust, and his hands shake as he writes a contract he barely understands. Malachi's tablet lies open in front of him, its carved marks catching the same oil-lit glow like quiet authority. Spend to survive, Malachi says, tapping Elias's draft with one blunt finger. Elias swallows. Then how do first rise without falling? Cut waste first, Malachi replies. Wealth is not a miracle, it is what remains after you stop leaking. Elias tries to argue custom, habit, pride, but the ink smears where his confidence fails. Malachi doesn't scold, he simply points to the accounts on the tablet, small debts stacked like bricks, repayments delayed until they become heavier than any promise. Elias learns the law that turns confusion into clarity: list every obligation, separate needs from wants, and keep a running ledger so the future cannot surprise you. In the following seasons, Elias applies the ancient discipline like a craftsman working stone, slow, deliberate, repeatable. When a client pays late, he doesn't chase with excuses, he records the delay, adjusts the schedule, and enforces clear terms next time. When a tempting job offers quick pay for messy work, he asks Malachi's question, "What does it cost me later?" before he signs. Soon his mistakes thin out. He stops buying status, stops borrowing to look wealthy, stops trusting words that don't match receipts. His first real gain is not a grand windfall, but the quiet victory of consistent saving, coins set aside piece by piece, each one earning another layer of safety. Malachi's counsel stays punchy, because wisdom without action is just noise. Pay yourself first, he says, even if the amount is small. Elias repeats it until it becomes muscle memory. Then comes the shift that changes everything. Elias stops treating money as luck and starts treating it as a system. He studies how trade rises and falls, not by gossip, but by patterns written across tablets: what buyers demand, what delays profits, which costs creep back like mold in damp grain. With careful planning, he turns spare savings into steady opportunities, funding reliable deals, taking on contracts he can complete well, and setting boundaries that protect his time. The clink of gold becomes more common, yet he doesn't grow careless, he grows precise. Diversify your risks, Malachi instructs, and don't pour all your hope into one jar. Elias learns to measure outcomes, keep reserves, and reinvest only after the ledger shows strength, not emotion. By the time his workshop gains proper oil lamps and his parchments are copied with cleaner strokes, his wealth feels earned rather than stolen. Years pass, and Elias's once hungry hands now teach as they once wrote. A young scribe arrives, desperate like Elias had been, hands raw from rubbing charcoal, eyes fixed on the door as if hunger might follow. Elias gestures to a fresh tablet and speaks with Malachi's steadiness, not showiness. Start with a budget, he tells the boy, and make it match your life today. He adds, track every coin's journey, if it isn't in the ledger, it's already gone. Soon the market hears a new kind of wisdom, one that doesn't depend on birth, only on decisions. Elias becomes the richest scribe in Babylon not because he chased gold blindly, but because he built a foundation: spend intentionally, save consistently, protect against risk, and invest with patience. In warm golden lighting, his office feels like an oil painting: sunbeams over stacked tablets, ink bottles aligned, and gold coins resting where they can be counted. The lesson remains timeless, even beyond Babylon's clay walls: financial freedom is not reserved for the gifted, it is earned by rules you practice until they become your reflex. Wealth favors the organized, Elias tells his final student, and the words land like a hammer: firm, memorable, true. The simplest rule he leaves behind is this: write it down, pay yourself first, and never let your money roam without a plan. Heat pressed on the clay streets of ancient Babylon like a breath from a furnace. Elias's ink-stained fingers shook as he tightened a satchel of half-ruined parchment, trying to snatch a single client from the crowd. His stomach cramped at the sound of gold coins clinking behind a polished merchant's stall, too loud, too certain, while his own hands smelled of oil, dust, and failure. Then Malachi appeared beneath warm golden lighting, as if the city itself had chosen him. His robe brushed the tablets in a quiet hush, and he didn't waste words. "You're writing again," Malachi said. Elias swallowed. "Writing won't pay rent." Malachi tapped a clay tablet with a careful knuckle. The sound was small, but it struck like a law. "You don't need more ink. You need a system." Elias opened his satchel. "First tried. First followed every promise. First lent when first shouldn't. First spent when first was afraid. Malachi leaned in, eyes steady. Say it plainly, you chase noise, not numbers. Elias flinched. First bought what looked valuable. Malachi's voice stayed calm. And wealth punished your imagination. The lesson came like a drumbeat, short, punchy, undeniable. Malachi had Elias reread the ancient script, line by line, until Elias could feel the difference between wishing and planning. First rule, Malachi said, protect your coin like a scribe protects parchment, preserve it before you decorate it. Elias remembered the week he'd thrown extra silver into a risky trade to prove himself, then watched it vanish, along with his peace. His hands tightened on the tablet now, different this time. Malachi continued, second rule, earn more by sharpening one skill, not by chasing every buyer. Elias nodded, embarrassed. First kept changing my style. Malachi replied, because you were scared of being average. Wealth prefers the patient craftsman. Next came the clatter of reality. Elias had been reckless with credit, letting others borrow without terms. Now Malachi made him write agreements with measured, ancient precision. He practiced until his writing hand stopped trembling. Third rule, Malachi said, no debt without a written boundary, interest, time, and consequence. Elias looked down at his parchment, then up at the market. The clink of coins sounded less like temptation and more like information. Warm golden light poured across Malachi's face, as he delivered the final lesson like a verdict. The wise mentor didn't promise miracles, he taught leverage. Fourth rule, set aside a portion first, Malachi said before spending. You can't save what you never reserve. Elias exhaled slowly, the kind of breath you take before starting over. He had made mistakes, messy ones, expensive ones, but now he could see the pattern. It wasn't luck. It was order. He walked to the merchant stalls with a new kind of posture. Ink-stained hands, yes, but deliberate. He offered services with clear pricing. He asked for partial payment up front. He kept a ledger where every coin had a home. When a client tried to rush him, Elias didn't flinch, he quoted terms, wrote them down, and let the city's chaos sort itself. The payoff wasn't a miracle flash. It was a steady rhythm, contracts signed, coins placed, parchment filled. One by one, the gold clink returned, this time quieter, earned, and repeatable. Elias didn't chase applause, he built trust like a wall of tablets. That evening, Malachi watched Elias count a small stack of coins under oil lamp glow. The light was warm and golden, the shadows soft like an oil painting coming alive. Elias's eyes shone, not with greed but with certainty. First thought the laws were about taking, Elias said. Malachi smiled faintly. They are about keeping. Wealth survives when your choices survive. Elias looked at his ledger and realized what had changed. He no longer begged the future to forgive him. He guided it with simple rules he could write, repeat, and defend. As Babylon cooled and distant drums faded, Malachi offered the closing clarity, the one Elias would carry beyond the ancient streets. Rule to remember, he said, protect your coin, increase your craft, write your boundaries, and reserve first, do that, and wealth stays teachable. Elias stepped into the night with a final thought that sounded timeless even in ancient air, the laws don't expire. They only wait for you to put ink to action, today, tomorrow, and in every chapter still unwritten. If you're ready to change your own story, open your ledger and start with one rule you can follow this week.
Thank you for watching. Goodbye.